everybody. I'm continuing my quest to record these in a different location every time, and as you can see, I'm running short of locations. But taking advantage of the good weather to be outside today. I just saw it's supposed to snow tonight actually, so trying to enjoy it while it lasts. And we're talking today about chapter 9 of the 1689 Baptist Confession of Faith, and this is a really important chapter. If you ask, a lot of Christians, what do you think of when you think of Calvinism or you think of the Reformed faith? Probably the first thing that people think of is they think of issues surrounding free will and what it means to say, to affirm the freedom of man's will. And that's exactly what chapter 9 of this is about. So as I've said, this is a great studying one of these confessions, a centuries old confession of faith. Helps us to understand, what exactly do we mean when we say a person confesses the Reformed faith. So, chapter 9 is about free will, and it only has 5 paragraphs. And what it kind of does is it follows the course of mankind's existence in various states. So, mankind was made in the state of innocence. Right? We're made in a state of innocence. Our first parents were made without sin, but with the possibility of sinning. So you might call it the state of innocence. After that, there was a fallen state, right, where Adam and Eve our first parents had sinned, led our whole human race into sin, into the bondage of sin. And so that's another condition. So if we're looking at what all states can mankind be in, well, we can be in an innocent state of innocence, like our father Adam. We can be in a fallen state, as we were born into. We can be in a state of grace. We can be, have received God's regenerating grace, and we can have new life. But through Christ, we can have new life. It's such that we are not what we used to be. That God's grace has redeemed us and given us new life. So that's the state of grace. And then we also know that we are not yet what we will be, that there's another state that we look forward to, the state of glory, or our future, the perfect state for mankind that's waiting for us. So when we say, does mankind have free will? Will is part of what it means to be a human, is that we have this capacity for making decisions. So how do we consider and make decisions in these various states? So let's look at these. Paragraph 1. God has endued the will of man with that natural liberty and power of acting upon choice, that it is neither forced nor by any necessity of nature determined to do good or evil. Okay, so this is right at the outset, undercutting certain caricatures of Reformed teaching. People say, Reformed people, they don't believe in free will. They believe that we're robots and we're compelled to do all of these things and we don't have any choice in the matter. Oh, actually, right here, this is what the Reformed teach. If you say that, you're not listening well. You're not listening to what the teachers are saying. Paragraph 1, God has given the will of man. He's endued us with that natural liberty. Natural liberty means like we are, by nature, we have a certain kind of freedom. And the power of acting upon choice. Okay, so we do make choices. Our choices are genuine. So we've spent, in the past chapters, we've talked a good deal about the sovereignty of God and how it extends to all things. So in all actions, human or otherwise, and everything that happens, we trace the hand of God and we say, God is at work. God is in control. And God is sovereign over all things. But this sovereignty does not cancel out the will of people that are much lower on the totem pole than God. God is sovereign over all things, right? And yet, somehow, there's a way that we make genuine, undetermined choices. So it says, it is neither forced. So if you're saying, well, the Reformed, they teach that, we're forced to do this or we're forced to do that. No, that's actually explicitly what we are not saying. The will is not forced, right? Men are not forced to do sins that are displeasing to them or that they don't want to do. Men want to commit the sins that they commit, right? And we'll talk about other kinds of choices in a second. It's neither forced nor by any necessity of nature determined to do good or evil. So you look at the way God made Adam in the garden. We'll talk about that in the next chapter a little bit. But just think about what a man is, what a human person is, right? They've got their body and they've got their soul and they've got their will and their mind and their emotions, right? This is what a human is. Here's the human being. If you just consider this human in their nature, like what is this machine designed to do? Is this machine the kind of machine that can only do good? Did God design a human being so that it could only do good? No, he did not. Did he design a human nature so that it could only do evil? No, that's not how God designed it either. He did design us with our own kind of a will that can choose from these different paths and courses. So everything we say about God's sovereignty does not cancel out. So we believe two things that when you first hear them, a lot of people say, how could those things go together? Okay, so we say God is in control of everything, and yet I have made meaningful choices. You say, well, how can both of those things be true? And there's several answers to that. The first thing we could do is try to explain how the nature of God's action does not, I've used a different phrase before, does not step on the toes of other actors. God's actions do not cancel out all other actors in his creation. Because God dwells outside of creation, right? God is not part of our time and our space. God doesn't have an address inside of our universe, and he doesn't exist in time. That means he doesn't overlap with us, or he doesn't, there's no conflict between him and us when there's an action done. Like God can be acting, and we can be acting. They're on a different register is a word that I heard a theologian use years ago, and I've always remembered it because he said God's actions are on a different register than ours. And I thought that's really helpful. Okay, so in other words, we're affirming both. Okay, that's the first. The first strategy is sometimes teachers try to explain how it can be that God's actions and our actions are not stepping on each other's toes or canceling each other out. That our freedom isn't canceling out God's sovereignty isn't canceling out our freedom. But the second answer that a lot of teachers choose to give to that question, and it's also something we should remember, is that this is the kind of thing that we should not expect to fully understand. This is difficult to understand in precisely the way that we would imagine something about God to be difficult to understand, right? How does God relate to his creation? How does God's action relate to our actions? We should expect that to be mysterious to us and difficult for us to fully understand. And in truth, we do not fully understand it, okay? So what we do is we affirm both of those things because Scripture says, again, sometimes people, I've heard people take issue with Reformed teaching. They'll say something like, it's all this system that's kind of imposed on the Bible, and it's man trying to be smarter than we can be, and trying to make answers where God has been silent. Hey, we should be silent where God is silent. And actually, that's exactly what the Reformed teaching is trying to do. It's trying to say, let's not cast out anything that the Bible tells us, even if we can't understand how those things go together. So that we don't fully understand how God can be sovereign over all things, and we can have this natural liberty that our choices are actually meaningful. Though we can't fully understand that, the Bible affirms both of those things, and so it's our job to submit to Scripture and to confess both of those things. Getting good fluctuation in our light content here. It's good. Paragraph 2. Now we're going to talk about man in his state of innocence. Man, in his state of innocency, had freedom and power to will and to do that which was good and well-pleasing to God, but yet was unstable, so that he might fall from it. Okay, so talk about our first parents, and we've only had this one example that we can see a little picture of in Scripture of what our human race was like in its infancy. It says that man had freedom and power to will and to do that which was good and well-pleasing to God. Okay. So Adam and Eve, before they fell into sin, they were able to will, to choose. They could choose to do what was pleasing to God, and they in fact did choose to do what was pleasing to God. They had that power. They were able to not sin. Sometimes we clarify, we say, man in his innocency was able to not sin. Okay? There was nothing, this is important to remember, there was nothing built into Adam. Adam wasn't built to fail. The deck was not stacked against Adam. God had given Adam an abundance of help to see to it that he would not fall into sin. So much so that Adam's sin is all the more, egregious, that he, in spite of all of the advantages that he had, he still fell into sin. So let's use a little illustration here I'll use for some of these other states too. Let's imagine like a sturdy, I don't want to think, when I say bridge, I don't want you to think like a swinging little, rope bridge or something like that. But let's think of a sturdy stone bridge that spans across this, churning river. And Adam is up on that bridge. He's standing up over this. There's no railing from several parts of the bridge so that Adam can get down off this bridge. He can get in the water if he wants to. And Adam's goal is to not fall in the water. Oh, you look at this situation Adam's in, you say, there's no reason he should fall in the water. He's up there on that bridge. He has every advantage. The bridge isn't wet or slick. There's plenty of level ground. There's no unsteady ground, or there's no traps here where Adam is going to fall in the water. So there's no reason that he shouldn't stay up there, except for his own decision to jump down into the water. And it says, but yet he was unstable so that he might fall from it. Now I say unstable, don't think that it means, God created Adam so he was like emotionally unstable or anything like that. What it means was there was nothing, like we said a second ago, about the way God designed us, this package of human nature, that there's nothing in us that's like a machine that the gears can only turn one way. Adam wasn't built so that his gears could only turn in the direction of good, nor was he made so that his gears could only turn in the direction of evil. Instead, he had this will, this certain freedom that he was made with, that he could choose different things. He had the capacity to take what God had given him and direct it towards evil. To return to our bridge illustration, Adam had the capacity to jump off that bridge if he chose to do it. And of course, that is exactly what he did. Man fell from the state of innocence. Paragraph 3. Man, by his fall into a state of sin, has wholly lost all ability of will to any spiritual good accompanying salvation. So as a natural man, being altogether averse from that good and dead in sin, is not able by his own strength to convert himself or to prepare himself thereunto. Okay, so here we're talking about man in his fallen state. And this should be more familiar to us because we were born into it. And most of us, we know about this far better than we would like to. What do we mean? So what is free will? Okay, what happened to the part of us that chooses things? Okay, Adam up on the bridge, he has the choice to stay dry, to stay standing upright, and he has the choice to jump down into the water where he loses all steadiness and stability. What do you have a choice to do now that you're down there in the river? We're people of the river. We're people born treading water. We're born here in this state. Well, we don't have the choice of standing up straight. There's nothing to stand on. Okay, we're born in this drowning, struggling for life condition. Now we have all kinds of choices. Keep our bridge illustration, the direction we swim, how hard we swim, what we do. We have all these choices, but there's a choice that we don't have. We do not have the ability to choose to stand up straight, right? Because we're, in this river over our heads. So this is what it says. We have lost all ability of will to any spiritual good accompanying salvation. Okay, so he's making a careful distinction here. There is a kind of spiritual good that he says accompanying salvation. So not denying that sinful people can do all sorts of things that look good or that we would call good. Good works, good thoughts, good vibes, all that. We're not denying that every man is as bad as he possibly could be. We've talked about that before, talking about sin. No one is saying mankind is as bad as they possibly could be. And so that means we do still have options open to us. We do still have liberty. But there's a kind of choice that we cannot make. There is an option that is off the table. Okay? We are not able to not sin. So here's Adam. He is able to not sin, and he's able to sin. Now we're down here in the water. We are not able to not sin. We sin from morning till evening. The thoughts and the intentions of our heart are corrupt. We are thoroughly corrupt. That means even when we're doing the best, even on our best day, even when we look the best, even when everyone around us is impressed with us, sin is still with us. We're still living in sin. Okay? And so that means there's that option that we don't have. There's options that we do have, and there's options that we don't have. The thing that we can't do is will any spiritual good accompanying salvation. We can't live like a person who is saved. That means we can't live like a person that's not in the river. We just live like people who are in sin. So, as a natural man, it goes on to say. So natural man, that's another word. Natural man is another way of saying now of people that are in a fallen state of sin. Since we are altogether averse from that good, so we are opposed. Everything in us does not want to choose that good. Again, if you take a sinner and you biopsy him and you examine him, you subject to any examination, you won't find any reason why the gears can't turn this way, but they don't. They don't. They only work towards evil. We are averse from that good, so our wills are bent. And we are dead in sin. So dead in sin is like where we are not able to choose what's right, what's good. And this is the conclusion. Man in this state is not able, by his own strength, to convert himself. Okay, so we can't save ourselves. We cannot save ourselves because we cannot will any spiritual good. That's what it means to be dead in sin. We are as so many corpses floating in this river of death and sin. It also says we are not able by our own strength to prepare ourselves to be saved. Okay, so this is also a very important point. Like it's not that we can get ourselves some of the way there. We can get ourselves in a good position to be saved, but actually God has to come and actually do the final bit of saving. That makes the real difference. No, when God's grace finds us, we are simply dead in sin. We are not prepared in any way for his grace. And this right here, I hope will help you, because I know that a lot of these discussions and debates about free will and Calvinism, to I think a lot of Christians, seem like a waste of time. They just are we really going to sit around and argue about this very complicated theology that I don't really understand, maybe nobody really understands? What is the actual point? Don't we have better things to do? And the answer is, as good as that sentiment may be, this is actually an extremely important discussion. Why are Calvinists so hung up on this discussion about free will? It is because the doctrine of salvation by grace hangs on it. Okay? Unless what I just said is right, unless what this confession just said is right, salvation is not all by grace. It is by grace plus something else. Unless it's true that God's grace meets us when our will is dead and unable to choose God, salvation is not entirely by his grace, right? Or even to prepare ourselves for it. If there's something that I first do to prepare myself to receive God's grace, it means I put myself in, basically I knew I was sick and I went to go see the doctor, right? That's a person preparing themselves to be healed, right? If you found out you were sick, so you said, I'm sick and I've got to deal with this. And so you started taking all the medicine that you had, available to you, and you called the doctor, you made the appointment, you went over there, you went to visit him. Sure, the doctor's doing the healing, the medicine he gives you doing the healing, but you could say, but I contributed, I prepared myself for that. That is different than salvation by grace. Okay? That patient has done something towards his own healing, and that is exactly what we want to deny in our discussion of salvation by grace. We want to say it is all by grace. And great efforts are gone through to try to show that, yes, salvation is by grace, but also we're not exactly completely, totally dead in our sins. And it won't work. Salvation by grace implies necessarily that we have done nothing and we could do nothing to save ourselves. Okay, that's the second, the second state, or state, our fallen state. Paragraph 4. When God converts a sinner and translates him into the state of grace, so here's our third state: innocence, fallen state of sin, state of grace. When God converts a sinner, translates him into the state of grace, he frees him from his natural bondage under sin, and by his grace alone enables him freely to will and to do that which is spiritually good. Okay, so state of grace, what's this like? Well, let's see if we can't build on our bridge illustration. God rescues us. He picks us up from where we're at, floating like so many corpses in this river of sin. And he sets us on let's imagine a broad stone staircase that's leading back up to the bridge, right? He sets us on this stone staircase so that we have solid ground underneath us. And the steps are wide and it's easy to stand here, and we're not in any serious danger of being washed back out into the river. We're standing here. Now the waves are still coming and splashing around us and soaking us. We're maybe still up to our ankles or up to our knees in the river of sin, but we're safe. We're actually planted on firm ground. We're standing upright. We look a whole lot like our father Adam looked like when he was in a state of innocence up on the bridge. Not exactly the same, because we're still getting splashed by the water. Okay, so that's an involved illustration. But I think it illustrates a couple points that are being made here in paragraph 4. God has freed us. When God rescues us and puts us in a state of grace, he frees us from that natural bondage to sin that we had, where we were not able to not sin. Okay? We were slaves of sin. We were dead in sin. That is not a fair way to describe a Christian. If you're a Christian, you shouldn't think of yourself as a slave of sin. You shouldn't think of yourself as dead in sin, right? We have been freed from our natural bondage. That means we, again, have the ability to not sin. We are able to not sin. It says, and by his grace alone enables him freely to will and to do that which is spiritually good. So again, in the same, we said earlier, we're not talking about anybody being forced to do anything, but God has done a work and transformed our will. He's thoroughly renovated our will. He's repaired it. Okay, our will was broken so that it was only going in one direction, towards evil, and there was a direction it could not turn in the direction of spiritual good that accompanies salvation. But by God's grace, he's changed our will. He's changed our will so that we are able to freely will and do that which is spiritually good. So as a Christian, you can choose. Now, just to help us understand what we mean by freely will. Christian, do you do good works? Is anybody forcing you to do those things? No. No one's forcing you to do those things. You're doing them freely. God isn't, you're not just finding yourself, I find my body moving and I'm doing good deeds. Like, no, you are choosing to do those good deeds through mixed motives or whatever, but you're choosing to do those good deeds, right? You're not a robot. You're actively involved in that. And yet the Bible can talk in very sovereign kinds of language about those good deeds you do as a Christian. The Bible can say the good works that you do are a gift from God to you, that they were prepared from all eternity for you to do. You were predestined to do those good works. Every good work that you've done as a Christian, you are predestined to do. Did you feel like you were under some kind of control, or that you were being manipulated or forced or coerced into doing something when you do this good? Of course not. You freely chose to do those things. And that's what we mean when we say God is in control. He's working. He's sovereign over these things, and yet you are freely willing to do them. Okay, but goes on. Yet so as that by reason of his remaining corruptions, he does not perfectly nor only will that which is good, but does also that which is evil. Okay, so there's remaining corruption. We're still down there getting splashed in the water. Believers, true, converted, regenerate, children of God, disciples of Jesus, real Christians, have remaining corruption. Sin remains in us. And that means while we find ourselves in the state of grace, and we are actually able to not sin, and we are able to do spiritual good, we are still not able to not sin. We are still, it's better to say, we still continue to sin. In fact, none of our works are wholly without the taint of sin. There's a remainder of sin in everything that we do. We don't do everything out of, when I do my best work, there's still sin with me. I'm still, my motivations may be not what they should be, or, the actions that I perform may not be fully pleasing to God. God receives them by his grace as if they were fully pleasing to him, but they in themselves would not be acceptable to God. So by reason of his remaining corruptions, he does not perfectly will or only will that which is good, but he also does that which is evil. Okay, so we Christians, we also do that which is evil. Paragraph 5. We mentioned the fourth state here. This will of man is made perfectly and immutably free to good alone in the state of glory only. Praise God, by his grace, one day we will be in the state of glory, and then we will be not able to sin. So in innocence, we were able to not sin. In our fallen state, we were not able to not sin. And one day in the state of glory, we will be not able to sin. We will be perfectly and unchangeably, that's what immutably means, perfectly and unchangeably free to good alone. Does that mean we're going to be robots? I know for some people, we're so attached to sin, and sin is so attached to us. It's very difficult for us to imagine not being able to sin. And in fact, when we try to imagine what it would be like to not be able to sin, we can only imagine ourselves as some kind of robot, or as being controlled, or that our mind is not functioning fully in some way. But you will be as free as you are now. Indeed, you will be much more free than you are now. And you will be free to perfectly do good alone. And that will be an amazing experience for us in the state of glory. So that's about the free will of man and what that means in our fourfold state, good purposes of God.